So I always thought, I guess like most kids, that money was the most important thing in the world. As a kid, I grew up with zero. Everybody rejected me. I went from graduating to working for a prince in Beverly Hills to going back to the UK and sleeping in a two-seat broken Renault Megane convertible car. Now I realized at this point that communication is a powerful tool. I couldn't even communicate with my family, and then I made the decision. So I started doing public speaking contests. I started winning. I started mentoring. I started running a business where I actually help people develop the best possible communication skills. Communication is generally a currency. How you spend it is up to you. Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Berriman, and I'm really excited to share some of my story with you today. What I want to do is actually walk you through the power of communication. So for me, I've always been really fascinated with what communication can bring as opposed to just money. And there's a reason to that, and what I'm going to do today is actually walk you through my story so you can actually see what communication can do to your lives if you master it and apply it correctly. So I always thought, I guess like most kids, that money was the most important thing in the world. Like nothing beat money. It was the number one end all be all. And I guess the reason I felt very strongly towards money is because as a kid, I grew up with zero. I mean, we had no money. My mum and dad worked, I think, approximately 4 jobs between them. My mum would work all day, my dad would work all night, sometimes they'd rotate. Never really got to see my parents under the same roof. Now, just to understand where my hunger for money really developed, as most guys my age, it was related to a car. Now, when I was at school, most kids had a BMW, or their parents had a nice Toyota or an Audi or a Land Rover. But what we had was a very specific car. You see, this car had 3 brown doors and 1 bright pink door attached and welded onto the side. It had a little rust hole strategically placed above the middle back seat. Now, the reason this was such an issue is because I was the youngest of 3 siblings, which meant my big brother would usually sit to the right and my big sister would usually sit to the left. And as you can imagine, I'm in the middle, and what that meant is whenever it rained, I got a compulsory shower in the car. So that car used to drive me crazy. I don't understand why we had that vehicle and everybody else had great cars. But one feature of this car in particular that drove my parents up the wall is that the fuel light didn't even work. We never knew how much fuel we had. Yes, you can imagine, we broke down a lot. Anyway, I was around about 5 years old. Now, I was asleep in bed in the bottom bunk, and my dad woke me up at night, which is really unusual because he never woke me up to say goodbye when he was going to work. But this night he did. And he was fully dressed with his work boots on, his jacket and his beanie, and he said to me, "Get up, get in the car." Now, I remember thinking this is fairly unusual, but I never questioned my dad, so I just did exactly what he told me to do. I got up, I got dressed, I got into the car. It was cold, it was dark. My brother sat in the right seat, my sister sat in the left, and yes, you guessed it, I'm beneath the rust hole. Only no one in the car was speaking, and I thought that was very unusual. Now, my dad just drove us out into some suburb, and he just parked on the top of this incredibly steep hill looking down at an estate at the bottom. And I remember how scared I was when my dad looked over his shoulder and said, "Shh, don't make a sound." And he lifted up the handbrake and we began to roll over the hill, and then we started picking up speed, getting faster and faster and faster and faster. And suddenly he yanked up the handbrake, we all flew forward in our seats, and the first thing he did was he put his ear to the floor of the car. Because you see, he wanted to listen to the sound of the fuel race from the back to the front, so he could just estimate how much fuel we had. That is how we lived as kids. We moved so many times, I wouldn't even unpack in some scenarios. Literally, we would just place the box there, and then in a couple of weeks, we would bounce to another place. And I just used to think to myself, why are we living like this? I'm a kid. I understand that there's a quality of life that we just were not having compared to others, and it didn't feel right. It affected my self-image at a very early age that I thought we were not worthy of some form of abundance. So that night, when everyone was asleep and we were home, I get out of my bed, I went to the bathroom, I closed the door, and I took down the last toilet paper from behind the rusty pipe running up the wall. And I sat on the floor and I began to rip that toilet paper into individual squares, one by one by one. And I stacked that tissue into a pile and I role played buying my parents a new car, buying my parents a house. I will never forget to this day how amazing I felt to actually experience role-playing, buying my parents out of our situation. For me, that lit a fire inside of me, and I knew whatever I was going to do in life, it had to be focused on money, as most people do. Fast forward a few years, I'm going to school, I'm trying to study hard so I can go to university. I made a conscious decision to be the first of my family to ever go to university, ever. And nothing was going to stop me. I was thinking lawyer, I was thinking doctor, I was thinking all these different things where I knew that you'd get a good salary because I thought I had to get a good degree, get a good job, get a house, be rich, free my family. That's how I saw things because that's what society said was the way. However, big problem. You see, I didn't feel worthy growing up, and it got worse when I went into school. Because the people that were supposed to be feeding positivity into my life, i.e. the teachers, were feeding negativity. They actually said that I was below average intelligence and they placed me into something called special education. And what that meant was I was in a classroom by myself for many periods with just 2 other kids with stickers and coloring books and all the things you'd give to a child. And it knocked my confidence completely off. So when exam time came round, they were saying to me, you can't sit this exam, or you're best aiming for E's, you're best aiming for D's, but I needed 5 C's to get into college. I needed those grades so that I could get to college, to get to university, to get that outcome. Only my teachers completely prevented me from doing that. Exam time finished, I've got 3 C's. I'm screwed. I remember, I don't know if anyone else listening to this has been through this experience, but when you get your grades back and you have C's and you need A's or you need B's and you've got 3 of them, your whole world turns upside down. And I remember having this very crucial conversation with myself that this is what I need to do. I have to get into university. It's non-negotiable. I have to get that outcome. And no one is going to stop me. Not a teacher, not my parents, no one. So I went to the university, the college in my local town. So I went to that college and I remember I just went to every member of staff and I absolutely sold myself to everyone. Excuse me, my name's Nathan. This is the grades I've got. I want to study this. No. Hi, my name's Nathan. I've got 3 C's, but if you let me, no. Everybody rejected me. Rejection, rejection, rejection. Because by law, you needed 5 C's to get into university. By educational standards, you needed 5 C's to get in. It was the policy of the college. And I remember just going to every floor, every classroom, every blog, and I spoke to everybody on every course. It didn't matter what it was. I had to get in. And then I came across the desk of a man named Mr. Harrison. He was the head of drama, the head of media, and head of English. He was amazing. He was a massive man. He was 6'6". He had a ridiculously deep voice, and he was very stern. And I went into his office. I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison." He said, "Yes." And I just took a seat, and I said to him, "Sir, I want to enroll myself in your course. I have 3 C's. I know I need 5. I have 3 C's. But if you just let me show you what I can do, if you just let me interview, audition, if you just tell me what to do, I promise you, I will do it. I promise you I will get an A. Let me show you what I can do. And I sold myself. That was the greatest sell I had ever done because it was my only option. And Mr. Harrison looked at me. He didn't say a word. He just picked up the phone on his desk and with his masculine deep voice, he said, I've got a gentleman here in my office who doesn't have the necessary grades, but I'm willing to vouch for him. I want to enroll him in my course. And as he hung up the phone, he looked at me and said, you had better get an A. Mr. Harrison was the first person who ever spoke life into me. He was the only person who made me feel like I was bigger than my circumstances. Because naturally we are. When you grow up moving from house to house to house in broken cars and you're stuck in special education classrooms, you're a victim of your environment. You cannot excel when someone is actually holding you back. Mr. Harrison was the first person who spoke life into me. And a few years later, I got the A. I got the grades, I was going to university, I was on fire. My self-image had grew significantly because my self-image in school was non-existent. The way people used to talk about me and the way people used to look at me, I felt so ashamed. But now, I had a positive dialogue with myself. And 2 years later, I got the A. I went to university, I graduated with a joint honors degree in Chinese and business studies, and I got quoted the best dissertation that year. All because someone believed in me, but most importantly, because I believed in myself. Now, I realized at this point that communication is a powerful tool. You see, when I came out of university and graduated, I had the degree, I had the confidence, I had everything I thought I needed, but I didn't have a job. I did not even get an interview. You see, I actually decided I was going to use my communication again. I had learned the skill. I went to California, Beverly Hills. You see, I've always had the California dream. I always wanted to live in LA with the celebrities and the industry and get connected to the right people. And I just went there. I booked a ticket. I went to California. And again, I went through every business in every street and networked with everybody that I possibly could. Now, I went into one very special hotel and I befriended the front of house manager and I really sold myself. And at the end, he said, we can't give you a job because of your visa. And I was like, thank you very much. I completely understand. So I went back to my hotel and I got a phone call that evening. And they said, we have a very unique opportunity for you. You see, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, Prince Faisal, is staying in our hotel on the top floor. Now, what he's looking for is someone who's confident, someone who's outgoing, someone who's going to take him around, be his assistant, and essentially just be the man. Show them around the city, be there, give him whatever he needs, just have a right-hand man. And I got the job. So to put this into perspective, I was in a hotel in California getting rejected by everybody, and then within one evening, I'm working for the Prince of Saudi Arabia. It was ridiculous. Communication has opened so many doors to me in my life. But this is where the message gets really, really deep. You see, all those things I was doing to free my family, going to university, get a good job, get the money, I started to get a taste for that. But naturally, I lost my visa. Naturally, the visa expired. I had to go home, and I had lost the relationship with all of my family. To this day, I do not know my dad's address. They divorced and broke up. Me and my mum, we did not talk for years. The whole family fell apart. You see, I worked so hard on every area of communication, but the most important, the communication with my family. And this was the lowest point in my life, because I had to go from working for a prince. I went from graduating to working for a prince in Beverly Hills to going back to the UK and sleeping in a 2-seat broken Renault Megane convertible car. I felt pretty bad about myself in the past, but I have never felt so bad as when I was sleeping in the car, because I felt once again like a complete failure. Because life does this, right? You're down here, you go to university, you come out, you graduate, you go and work for a prince, and now you're homeless. Felt like no matter what I did, I could not get ahead. I had worked so hard to develop my communication skills in sales and in business that I could open up doors, but I couldn't even communicate with my family, the thing that really gave me fulfillment. And I just felt like ending it all. But once again, that inner voice came out and said, you've got so much more that you can do. You can quit tomorrow, but you have not given nearly enough today. And then I made the decision. Off I went. I came overseas. I started building a business in South Korea. I started working for a big company in Hong Kong. Then I moved to Australia. Then what I started doing is winning public speaking contests. You see, what I realized was that even though my family had fell apart and I didn't feel like I was able to connect with them, I could help other people connect with their families. I could help other people connect in their relationships. You see, I was so lonely growing up. I felt like I had no real association. I did not feel worthy. I did not feel confident. My self-image was terrible. I wanted to make sure that nobody felt that way. So I started doing public speaking contests. I started winning. I started mentoring. I started running a business where I actually help people develop the best possible communication skills so they can maximize their relationships, so that they can open doors that had never been opened for them before. You see, now I look at people and I work with them because I see so much potential. If people can just develop the art of communication, they can change their lives holistically. Professionally, romantic, socially, and personally. But the most important communication that most people do not develop is the communication with themselves. You see, how you communicate with yourself directly determines how you communicate with everybody. Work on your inner self-talk so that you can maximize your relationships. Develop that inner self-talk so that you can maximize your relationships and you can maximize every opportunity that comes your way. I am so excited about what's coming in the future, and now I've started to rebuild certain relationships in my family. Now I'm starting to talk to my dad. Now me and my mum are back on great terms. I'm starting to feel like I'm connected to my family again. If you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. Thank you so much for listening to my story, guys. I hope you take away that communication is genuinely a currency. How you spend it is up to you. Thank you.
Tell us what you think about this video, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.